You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. These words from Marcus Aurelius aren't just a poetic reminder of our mortality. They're a call to live fully and intentionally. Death is one of the few things every single person on this planet will face, yet it's a topic we often push aside, avoid, or even fear. But what if we're looking at it all wrong? What if, instead of a source of dread, the thought of our mortality could be the very thing that helps us live a more meaningful life? That's exactly what Stoicism teaches us. In this video, we're going to explore how embracing our impermanence, rather than running from it, can transform the way we navigate our days, our choices, and ultimately our existence. So let's dive into the wisdom of the Stoics and discover why facing the reality of death might just be the key to truly living. Epictetus once said, "Death is nothing dreadful, but instead the judgment about death that it is dreadful is what is dreadful." At the heart of Stoicism lies a truth that many of us instinctively resist. Mortality is not a disruption to life. It is life. It's as natural as the changing of the seasons or the setting of the sun. The Stoics believed that fearing death, something entirely beyond our control, is a waste of our mental and emotional energy. Instead, they urged us to focus on what we can control: our thoughts, our choices, and our character, because these are the things that shape how we live even in the face of death. Think about it this way: mortality is the ultimate equalizer. No amount of wealth, status, or power can shield anyone from the inevitability of death. Whether you're an emperor or a farmer, the end comes for us all. To the Stoics, this wasn't a depressing reality but a clarifying one. It's a reminder that life is fleeting, and within that fleeting nature lies its value. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and a devoted Stoic, often reminded himself of this. He wrote, "Do not act as if you are going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." These words are a call to action, encouraging us to focus on what truly matters before it's too late. Mortality also serves as a humbling force. It strips away the illusions that we are invincible or that we have unlimited time to chase what's important. Many of us get caught up in trivial matters, worrying about insignificant problems or chasing fleeting pleasures. But when viewed through the lens of life's impermanence, these distractions lose their grip on us. Suddenly, the argument you had last week or the promotion you didn't get seems trivial. What really matters is how you treat others, how you conduct yourself, and whether you're living in alignment with your values. The Stoics believed that accepting mortality was essential to living a virtuous life. Think about it. If you truly understand that your time is limited, you're far less likely to squander it on things that don't matter. You're more likely to pursue wisdom, integrity, and purpose. Mortality becomes the framework within which you make meaningful choices, ensuring that when your time does come to an end, you can look back and feel at peace, knowing you lived well. So, how do we shift our mindset to embrace this perspective? A good starting point is to reflect on the impermanence of everything around us, not just life itself, but the moments, relationships, and possessions we hold dear. This isn't to make us feel despair or detachment. Rather, it's to deepen our appreciation for what we have while we have it. When you realize that every sunrise, every laugh with a friend, or every kind word spoken is fleeting, you're more present, more grateful, and more intentional. The Stoics didn't teach us to dwell on death to darken our days, but to illuminate them. By confronting the inevitability of our end, we free ourselves to live with a clearer sense of purpose and a greater capacity for joy. After all, we may not control how or when death comes, but we absolutely control how we respond to its reality. And that, as the Stoics remind us, is what truly defines a life well lived. The Stoic concept of Amor Fati or love of fate takes the acceptance of mortality to an even deeper level. It's not just about tolerating the inevitability of death or stoically enduring life's challenges. It's about embracing everything, good and bad, as an essential and beautiful part of the whole. To love your fate means to recognize that every experience, every event, every joy, and every sorrow is woven into the fabric of existence. And yes, this includes death. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, often reflected on the universe's cycles and the interconnectedness of all things. He observed how nature operates in harmony, with every part serving a purpose within the grand design. Just as the waves return to the ocean, the leaves fall from the trees, or a flower wilts to make space for new growth, so too must our lives follow this natural rhythm. Death is not an interruption of life, it's part of its flow. Marcus wrote, "Observe how transient and trivial all mortal things are. Yesterday a blob of sperm, tomorrow ashes or a skeleton. Yet they pass through life and live in it for a while, and the soul will pass too, leaving behind its influence. By understanding that we are a small but meaningful part of this greater whole, we can begin to approach our mortality not with fear but with gratitude." Consider this: what if the very things we resist, loss, failure, endings, are what make life meaningful? Amor Fati teaches us to stop fighting against life's transience and instead to embrace it as fundamental to what makes life precious. Rather than lament the inevitability of death, we are invited to see it as a reminder to treasure the time we have, to fully inhabit each moment, and to accept that life is made beautiful precisely because it doesn't last forever. In modern terms, imagine someone facing a terminal illness. While many may respond with despair, there are countless stories of individuals who find a profound sense of peace by accepting their circumstances. For example, consider someone who chooses to spend their remaining days reconnecting with loved ones, pursuing their passions, and cherishing life in a way they never had before. These people often describe experiencing a deeper appreciation for life's small, quiet moments: a sunset, a laugh with a friend, or the feel of the wind on their face. In embracing their fate, they no longer waste energy battling what they cannot change. Instead, they live fully and purposefully, turning an inevitable end into a celebration of what they've had. Now take a moment to ask yourself this: do you resist life's transience, holding on to an illusion of permanence, or do you embrace it with an open heart? So many of us spend our lives trying to control what is uncontrollable, fighting against change, trying to freeze time, or clinging tightly to what is bound to pass. But when we practice Amor Fati, we step into alignment with life itself. We begin to see that the uncertainty, the impermanence, and even the inevitability of death are not obstacles to be overcome but truths to be embraced. The beauty of Amor Fati is that it liberates us. It asks us to stop wishing for a different reality and to fully accept the one we've been given. When you do this, you begin to see that every moment, every smile, every challenge, every breath is a gift. And when the time comes for this chapter to end, you can meet it with the same love and acceptance with which you've lived. This is what it means to love your fate. To not just accept mortality, but to embrace it, knowing that it's an inseparable part of this incredible, interconnected journey we're all on together. In Stoic philosophy, there's a profound practice known as Memento Mori, which translates to "remember that you will die." It wasn't meant to be morbid or unsettling, but rather a daily exercise to sharpen one's focus on what truly matters. The ancient Stoics believed that keeping death in mind wasn't just useful, it was essential for living well. Picture this: every day, Stoics like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca would meditate on death. They'd reflect on the transient nature of life, not as a source of fear, but as a catalyst for gratitude and action. By reminding themselves that their time was limited, they freed themselves from the distractions that often consume us and redirected their energy toward living with purpose. Marcus Aurelius, for instance, would frequently write in his journal reminders of mortality, such as, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." These meditations weren't meant to paralyze him with dread. They were meant to wake him up, to remind him that life is happening here and now, and that putting off what matters isn't an option when time is in such short supply. This is the heart of Memento Mori, not to dwell on death as an end, but to use the awareness of it to make the life we're living more vibrant, intentional, and meaningful. Seneca, another influential Stoic, had an incredibly insightful way of explaining this. He said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Think about that for a moment. The issue isn't necessarily that life is too brief. It's that we often fail to use the time we've been given wisely. How often do we fritter away hours scrolling on our phones, obsessing over trivial problems, or postponing dreams for some vague later that may never come? Seneca's words remind us that time is the one resource we can't replenish, and yet it's the one we most often take for granted. The Stoics viewed Memento Mori as a tool to combat this tendency. When you actively reflect on the fact that your life isn't endless, something shifts. Mundane moments suddenly hold more weight. A simple conversation with a loved one becomes a treasured interaction. A sunset feels richer. That project you've been putting off starts to feel like an opportunity rather than a burden. By remembering death, we remember to live not passively, but with gratitude and intention. Let's take a moment to bring this into our own lives. When was the last time you truly appreciated the people around you, or fully immersed yourself in an experience without worrying about tomorrow or replaying yesterday? Memento Mori invites us to stop sleepwalking through our days and start paying attention. If you knew today was your last, what would you do differently? Would you spend more time with loved ones? Stop procrastinating on a passion project. Be kinder to yourself and others. Some people incorporate Memento Mori into their daily routine by reflecting each morning or evening on the impermanence of life. Others keep visual reminders, a small skull, a clock, or even a simple journal entry to gently nudge them to stay mindful of life's brevity. The form doesn't matter as much as the result, a deeper appreciation for the present and the decisions you make within it. So here's a challenge. Take a moment today to pause and reflect. Think about Seneca's words. Consider the time you've been given and how you're using it. Don't let this be a source of regret, let it be a source of motivation. By embracing the wisdom of Memento Mori you can transform your days from something to simply get through into something to truly savor. Because when you live with the end in mind, you begin to see just how precious the present truly is. When was the last time you worried about something that, looking back, didn't really matter? Maybe it was a small embarrassment at work, a disagreement over something trivial, or not getting enough likes on a social media post. At the moment, it might have felt overwhelming or frustrating. But now, can you even remember why it seemed so important? This is where the awareness of mortality becomes not just a reality to accept, but a powerful tool to reshape our priorities and how we approach life. The Stoics teach us that keeping death in mind isn't meant to inspire fear. It's meant to provide clarity. When we truly grasp how fleeting life is, we start to see that so much of what we spend our time and energy on simply doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Seneca puts it perfectly when he says, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." In other words, we waste our days caught up in petty worries and superficial pursuits as if our time is infinite. But nothing could be further from the truth. Recognizing the limits of our time isn't meant to weigh us down. It's a wake-up call to focus on what actually matters. Imagine this: if you only had 1 day, 1 week, or 1 year left to live, would you really spend it stressing over that awkward email you sent or holding onto old grudges? Probably not. Awareness of mortality helps us zoom out and see life with a broader perspective. It's like stepping to the top of a mountain suddenly. All the little bumps and pebbles on the ground seem insignificant compared to the vast landscape stretched out before you. This is what mortality does for our priorities. It forces us to ask, am I focusing on what truly matters, or am I letting myself get lost in the trivial? For the Stoics, the answer lies in distinguishing the essential from the unimportant. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on this in his writing. He reminded himself to simplify, to strip away distractions and focus on what contributes to a life of virtue and meaning. He would ask himself, is this essential? It's a question worth applying to our own lives. If something doesn't align with your values, your purpose, or the well-being of those you love, why spend your precious time on it? Let's take a common example. How often do we stress about material things, the perfect car, the newest phone, or the trendiest clothes? These things might give us temporary satisfaction, but in the end, they don't bring lasting fulfillment. The Stoics understood this well. They saw that true contentment comes not from accumulating things, but from cultivating qualities like wisdom, kindness, and courage. When we reflect on our mortality, it becomes clear that the pursuit of external stuff pales in comparison to the importance of relationships, personal growth, and living with integrity. And it's not just about what we eliminate, it's about what we focus on. Awareness of death encourages us to spend more time on what matters, being present with loved ones, pursuing meaningful goals, and contributing to something bigger than ourselves. It helps us let go of needless comparisons, petty disputes, and the race for constant validation. Instead, we're reminded to live in alignment with our deeper values, because those are the things that will endure not in time, but in the impact they leave behind. So, the next time you find yourself caught up in worry or obsessing over something trivial, take a breath and ask yourself, will this matter a week from now? A year from now, when I look back on my life, will I even remember this moment? Most of the time, the answer will be no. And when you keep that in mind, it becomes easier to let go of the things that don't serve you. Mortality isn't just a final destination, it's a guide, constantly nudging us toward a life of purpose. And the sooner we embrace that perspective, the sooner we can focus on what truly matters. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." These words encapsulate one of the most profound insights in Stoic philosophy. Mortality is not just a reminder of life's brevity, but a guide, a compass pointing us toward a life of virtue. By keeping our impermanence in mind, we're prompted to act with wisdom, courage, and justice, knowing that our time is limited and that what we leave behind is the sum of our choices. For the Stoics, living as if today were your last day wasn't about recklessness or indulgence. It was about living deliberately. Imagine waking up each day with the awareness that it could be your final chance to embody the best version of yourself. Would you waste time on petty arguments, or would you seek resolution? Would you act dishonestly to gain a temporary advantage, or would you hold fast to your principles, knowing that integrity lasts far longer than fleeting gains? This is the moral framework Stoicism offers. The awareness of death challenges us to align our actions with our values and to prioritize what truly matters. Consider wisdom, one of the core Stoic virtues. Reflecting on mortality encourages us to focus on what is within our control and to let go of what is not. For example, in moments of conflict, we often waste energy proving we're right or holding on to pride. but when you acknowledge the finite nature of your time, you realize how precious peace and understanding are. Instead of clinging to anger, you might choose wisdom by stepping back, seeking common ground, and resolving the issue, understanding that no disagreement is worth sacrificing your inner tranquility or your relationship with the other person. Justice is another virtue that mortality brings into sharper focus. If today were your last day, would you treat others unfairly or with cruelty? Or would you strive to act in ways that uplift and respect those around you, knowing that your actions contribute to the greater good? In a modern context, this could mean advocating for fairness in your workplace, standing up for someone who's being mistreated, or simply choosing kindness in your daily interactions. Mortality reminds us that the legacy we leave behind is built on the way we treat others, not on the accolades or possessions we accumulate. Then there's courage, the strength to stand firm in your values, even when it's uncomfortable or difficult. Living with the awareness of death helps us put our fears into perspective. That presentation you're nervous about, that leap of faith you've been putting off. When you see life through the lens of its impermanence, these challenges shrink in significance compared to the opportunity to grow and stay true to your principles. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the choice to act in spite of it, knowing that each decision to do what's right adds to the story of a life well lived. Let's bring this to the present. Imagine you're facing a tough decision at work. Perhaps you're under pressure to cut corners, take credit for someone else's efforts, or compromise your values to please a superior. It might seem tempting, even justifiable in the moment, but if you were to ask yourself, what if this were my last day? What kind of person would I want to be remembered as? The answer becomes clear. Acting with integrity, even when it's hard, ensures that your actions are aligned with your moral compass, regardless of external pressures. The beauty of mortality as a guide is that it strips away distractions and exposes what's essential. It reminds us that our time is short, but that the way we spend it, by living virtuously, creates meaning far beyond our years. By embracing this perspective, we not only honor the time we have but also shape a legacy rooted in wisdom, justice, and courage. So, as Marcus Aurelius advised, live as if today were your last. Let that awareness guide your actions, your choices, and your character, because in the end, it's not how long we live that matters, it's how well we live. Epictetus once taught, what upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about these things. And when it comes to death, this couldn't be more true. Death, in and of itself, is not inherently terrible, it's simply the natural end of life. What makes it feel terrifying is the meaning and judgment we attach to it, the fear of the unknown, the worry about unfinished business, or the sense of losing control. Stoicism, however, challenges us to examine these judgments and reminds us that this fear is rooted in an illusion, the illusion of control. Let's start with this. How much control do we really have over life? The honest answer is very little. We can't control the actions of others, we can't predict the future, and we certainly can't dictate when or how we will leave this world. But what we can control is how we think about these things. The Stoics taught that fear of death arises when we cling to the mistaken belief that it's something we can or should manage. But once we accept that death is a natural and inevitable part of life, a process completely outside our control, we can free ourselves from the grip of fear. Imagine you're standing in the middle of a rainstorm. You can't control when it started or when it will end, but you do have a choice. You can either stand there cursing the rain, drenched and miserable, or you can accept it, even finding peace in the sound of raindrops or the refreshing coolness in the air. Death, like the rain, is something we cannot stop. Resisting it only creates more suffering. But when we learn to let go of this resistance and accept it as part of the natural order, we can approach life with a sense of calm and clarity. Epictetus's teachings also encourage us to reflect on how much of our fear is based on assumptions rather than reality. What exactly are we afraid of when we think about death? Is it the physical act of dying? Is it the loss of experiences? Or is it simply the unknown? By breaking down these fears into specifics, we often find that the overwhelming dread we feel is built on layers of misunderstanding and avoidance. For instance, if we fear the process of dying, we can remind ourselves that much of it lies beyond our influence. If we fear the unknown, we can focus on the fact that what's unknown is neither inherently good nor bad, it's just unknown. One practical way to reframe this fear is to shift your perspective from focusing on what you can't control, death itself, to what you can control, how you live. Embrace each moment as an opportunity to act with virtue, to connect with others, and to pursue what truly matters. The next time you catch yourself worrying about death, ask yourself, how does this fear serve me? And instead, redirect that energy towards something within your control, whether it's being present with loved ones, working on your goals, or simply taking the time to appreciate the beauty of life as it happens. Take a moment to reflect. How does your fear of death influence your daily choices? Does it stop you from taking risks, from pursuing the things you love, or from being vulnerable with the people who matter most? Recognizing the role that fear plays in our lives can be the first step in disarming it. When you see death not as a looming shadow but as a natural end, you stop letting the fear of it dictate your actions. The Stoics saw death not as something to live in fear of, but as a reminder to live fully. By letting go of the illusion of control and reframing how we think about mortality, we can replace fear with a peaceful acceptance. And in doing so, we open ourselves up to a richer, more intentional life, one that isn't ruled by what lies beyond our control, but by the choices we make every single day. What would you do differently if today were your last day? It's a question most of us avoid, but the Stoics would urge us to confront it head-on. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and one of Stoicism's greatest thinkers, wrote, "Do every act of your life as though it were your last." These words aren't asking us to live recklessly or indulge in every fleeting impulse. They're calling us to live deliberately, to recognize the immense value of the present moment and to treat it as the precious gift that it is. Reflecting on mortality has a way of sharpening our focus. When we remember that tomorrow is uncertain and that the future is something we can never truly control, we stop wasting time on things that don't matter. The petty arguments, the endless scrolling on our phones, and the hours spent worrying about what-ifs suddenly seem trivial. Instead, we're reminded to pay attention to what's happening right here, right now. Whether it's enjoying a meal, listening to a friend, or taking a quiet walk, the present moment becomes richer when we approach it with the awareness that it won't last forever. Consider how often we rush through our days on autopilot, thinking about the next deadline or the next task without really being present for the life we're living. Stoicism reminds us that the future is never guaranteed. The only moment we truly have is the one we're experiencing right now. This isn't meant to sound bleak, it's actually freeing. By anchoring our attention in the present, we can cut through the noise and focus on the things that truly bring meaning and joy to our lives. Take something as simple as spending time with a loved one. How many of us are guilty of being physically present but mentally elsewhere, checking our phones, thinking about work, or replaying past conversations in our heads? When we appreciate the fragility of life, these moments take on a new weight. That cup of coffee with a friend isn't just another routine. It's a fleeting experience that will never happen in exactly the same way again. Mortality teaches us to be fully there, to savor the laughter, the connection, and the warmth of human interaction with a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude, in fact, is one of the most powerful gifts that comes from reflecting on our mortality. When we stop taking life for granted, we start to notice the beauty in everyday things. The way sunlight filters through the window, the sound of birds in the morning, or the simple comfort of a quiet evening at home. These are things we might overlook when we're caught up in the chaos of daily life. But when you remember that time is finite, even the smallest moments become opportunities for appreciation and joy. The awareness of death also has a way of shifting our priorities. If today were your last day, would you spend it holding onto grudges, obsessing over material possessions, or striving for external validation? Probably not. You'd focus on what truly matters, whether that's spending time with the people you love, pursuing something you're passionate about, or simply experiencing the world around you with open eyes and an open heart. Mortality clears away the clutter and reminds us that the most meaningful things in life are often the simplest. So, how can we take this philosophy and apply it to our daily lives? Start small. The next time you're with a friend or family member, put your phone away and give them your undivided attention. When you're eating a meal, slow down and truly taste the food instead of rushing through it. And when you find yourself worrying about the future, pause, take a deep breath, and bring your focus back to the present moment. These little shifts may seem minor, but over time, they can transform the way you experience life. The Stoics didn't reflect on mortality to dwell on death. They did it to enhance their appreciation for life. By recognizing the uncertainty of tomorrow, they lived more fully today. And the good news is we can do the same. Every moment we're given is a chance to live with intention, gratitude, and presence. Let's not waste it. What survives us is not the wealth we accumulate, nor the titles we achieve, but the good we do for others. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What we do now echoes in eternity." For the Stoics, mortality wasn't just a reminder to live fully, it was a call to contribute meaningfully. They believed that our brief time here is an opportunity to leave a positive impact, to make the world a little better for those who come after us. And importantly, this contribution isn't about striving for fame or recognition. It's about acting in alignment with virtue and focusing on the good we can offer, no matter how small or unseen it might seem. The Stoic perspective on mortality asks us to shift our focus outward. Instead of obsessing over what we can take from life, the Stoics encourage us to ask, "What can I give?" When you realize that your time is limited, there's a natural pull to use it in ways that matter, not just to yourself, but to others. This could mean contributing to your community, sharing your knowledge, creating something of value, or simply being a source of kindness and support to the people around you. These actions, however small, ripple outward, creating an enduring legacy of goodness. What's especially powerful about the Stoic approach is that it separates contribution from ego. The Stoics believed that the worth of your actions isn't dependent on whether they're acknowledged or celebrated. Marcus Aurelius advised, "Do not expect a plateau to arise. Be content if the smallest thing goes well, and consider even that to be no small thing." In other words, don't wait for grand opportunities to leave your mark. Focus on consistent, meaningful efforts, no matter how unnoticed they might seem. True contribution isn't about how loud the applause is. It's about the quiet integrity of doing what's right. Take a moment to think about this in modern terms. Consider someone who spends their weekends volunteering at a local food bank, helping individuals who may never know their name, or a teacher who inspires their students, not for recognition, but simply out of a love for guiding others. Or even an artist who creates something beautiful, knowing it might be appreciated long after they're gone. These acts of contribution might not make headlines, but they have a lasting impact, and they create the kind of legacy that aligns with Stoic values. The idea of creating a legacy through contribution also ties to the Stoic belief in interconnectedness. Stoicism teaches us that we're all part of a larger whole, like threads in the fabric of humanity. Our actions, no matter how small, are not isolated, they influence the collective. This perspective helps to ground us in the understanding that serving others is not just an obligation, but a shared human purpose. By contributing, we fulfill our role in this greater web, leaving behind something of value for those who follow. And the beauty of this philosophy is that it allows us to let go of the need for recognition or control over outcomes. The Stoics remind us to focus on the things within our control, our thoughts, our actions, our efforts, and to release attachment to how those efforts are received. This is a freeing realization. You don't have to change the entire world, you just have to do your part, however modest it might be. Whether it's helping a neighbor, mentoring a colleague, or creating something that inspires others, what matters is the intention and the act itself, not the credit that follows. So, how can we apply this in our own lives? Start by asking yourself, what can I do today with the time and resources I have to make a difference? It doesn't have to be monumental. Even a small act of kindness or generosity can have a ripple effect far greater than you imagine. Maybe it's dedicating an hour to volunteer work, writing something that uplifts others, or simply being there for someone who needs support. The Stoics teach us that every act of contribution, no matter how seemingly insignificant, adds to a positive legacy. Mortality, then, is not just a reminder of life's fragility, it's an invitation to leave behind something meaningful. By choosing to focus on what we give instead of what we get, we align with the Stoic ideal of living virtuously. And as Marcus Aurelius said, those acts of goodness, no matter how small, will echo long after we're gone. Whether or not anyone remembers your name, your contributions will live on through the people and the world you've touched. That is the legacy of a life well lived. Fear of death isn't just fear of the end, it's often a fear of living authentically. How many of us hold back from pursuing what matters most because we're scared of failure, rejection, or discomfort? How often do we prioritize the opinions of others over our own values, simply because we're afraid of standing out or being judged? At its core, the fear of death is closely tied to the fear of losing what we think we have, and ironically, this fear can keep us from truly living. The Stoics understood this paradox and they offered a radical solution: embrace mortality as a path to freedom. Epictetus famously said, "He who has learned how to die has unlearned how to be a slave." What he meant was that the person who comes to terms with their mortality is no longer controlled by fears of what might happen or desires for things they don't truly need. When you accept that life is finite, you stop wasting time on the trivial or conforming to expectations that don't align with your values. The fear of death loses its power because you realize that the only thing worth fearing is not living a virtuous life while you have the chance. Think about it. If you knew your time was limited, and it is, would you stay silent when your values are challenged? Would you let fear of embarrassment stop you from speaking your mind? Or would you find the courage to stand up for what you believe, knowing that you're staying true to yourself? This is the freedom that comes from embracing mortality. It strips away the noise, the distractions, the pressures to fit into roles you never wanted in the first place. It gives you the courage to live authentically, because there's nothing left to lose except the opportunity to live with integrity. Let's look at a practical example. Imagine you're in a meeting and a discussion comes up where someone proposes something you strongly disagree with, a course of action that feels unethical or goes against your principles. It might feel easier to stay quiet, to avoid conflict, or to tell yourself it's not worth the discomfort. But when you reflect on the Stoic approach to mortality, you realize that staying silent means compromising the kind of person you want to be. In the grand scheme of life, what does it matter if speaking up makes you unpopular for a moment? What matters far more is knowing that you acted in alignment with your values. By embracing your mortality, you gain the clarity and courage to prioritize what's right over what's easy. This freedom doesn't just apply to big, dramatic moments. It can transform how you approach everyday life too. Think about how often we live chasing external things: wealth, status, approval. We tell ourselves that these will make us happy, but in reality, they often leave us feeling more trapped. The Stoics remind us that true freedom isn't found in external achievement. It's found in inner peace, which comes from living according to your principles, unaffected by the opinions or expectations of others. When you realize that none of these external things will follow you beyond this life, their grip on you starts to fade. You stop being a slave to desires that don't serve you, and you start living with a sense of liberation. This doesn't mean abandoning ambition or withdrawing from the world. On the contrary, it means engaging with life more fully, with purpose and authenticity. By letting go of the fear of death, you give yourself permission to pursue what matters most to you, unburdened by anxiety or the need to meet someone else's standards. Whether it's expressing yourself honestly, pursuing a passion you've been putting off, or simply making decisions that align with your values, embracing mortality allows you to live with courage and clarity. So take a moment to ask yourself, what would you do if fear no longer held you back? If you knew your time was limited, would you take that leap, have that hard conversation, or stop worrying about things that don't align with your values? The freedom we gain through accepting our mortality isn't just philosophical, it's deeply practical. It empowers us to live authentically, to make choices with intention, and to prioritize the things that truly matter. This is the gift of Stoicism, a life not ruled by fear, but shaped by courage and virtue. We all walk the same path, the path that begins with birth and inevitably ends with death. No matter who we are, where we come from, or what we achieve in life, this universal truth binds us together. So, how does this realization change the way we treat others? For the Stoics, reflecting on mortality wasn't just about living better as individuals. It was about fostering a deeper sense of compassion, unity, and connection with the rest of humanity. Recognizing our shared mortality strips away the divisions we create: status, wealth, nationality, and reminds us that at our core, we are all participants in the same fleeting human experience. Marcus Aurelius reflected on this often. In his *Meditations*, he wrote, "We were born for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth." To act against one another, then, is contrary to nature. What he's pointing out is that humanity isn't just a collection of isolated individuals. We are interdependent parts of a greater whole. Mortality brings this into sharp focus because it reminds us that we are all subject to the same natural order. Death doesn't discriminate. Whether we're rich or poor, famous or unknown, powerful or powerless, it will come for each of us in the end. And in the face of that reality, the petty differences and judgments we cling to lose their meaning. Imagine standing in a busy city square or walking through your neighborhood. Every person you pass, every stranger on the street, every co-worker at the office, every person you'll never meet is living their own life filled with hopes, fears, struggles, and joys. And yet, no matter how different their journey might look on the surface, they all share the same destination as you. This awareness can transform how we see others. Instead of viewing people through the lens of their titles or appearances, we start to recognize them as fellow travelers on the same journey. It becomes harder to judge, dismiss, or look down on someone when we remember that they, too, are grappling with the fragility of existence. This understanding is central to Stoicism. The Stoics believed that by embracing the unity of humanity, we could cultivate compassion and break down the barriers that divide us. When we reflect on our shared mortality, we begin to see that the things that separate us, differences in opinion, culture, or background, are trivial compared to the things that connect us. Mortality levels the playing field and reminds us that we are all part of the same fragile, temporary, and beautiful human experience. So, how does this awareness change the way we treat others? First, it encourages humility. When you remember that you're no more immune to death than anyone else, it's easier to let go of arrogance or superiority. It's easier to approach others with kindness and understanding, even when they make mistakes, because you realize you are just as flawed and human as they are. Second, it fosters empathy. If you know that every person you meet is carrying the same burden of mortality, it becomes easier to forgive their shortcomings, to listen to their struggles, and to offer support when they need it. After all, we're all in this together. Marcus Aurelius also reminds us of the importance of seeing ourselves as part of a larger community. He wrote, "What injures the hive injures the bee." This is a powerful metaphor for how interconnected we are. When we harm others, whether through cruelty, neglect, or indifference, we ultimately harm ourselves because we're undermining the unity and cooperation that sustain all of us. On the other hand, when we act with kindness and contribute to the well-being of others, we strengthen the bonds that make life meaningful. So, here's a question to reflect on. When you interact with others, how often do you pause to consider that they, like you, are navigating the same impermanence of life? How might this perspective change the way you respond to someone who frustrates you, or how you approach a stranger in need? By keeping our shared mortality in mind, we can treat others with greater respect and compassion, knowing that each of us is walking the same tenuous path, trying to make the most of the time we have. What kind of world could we create if we all embraced this truth? The Stoic teachings on embracing mortality offer us more than just a way to think about death. They provide us with a powerful framework for how to live. By accepting life's transience, we gain clarity about what truly matters. By focusing on the present, we allow ourselves to fully experience the moments that make life meaningful. And by using the inevitability of death to shape our priorities, we ensure that our days are spent in pursuit of what aligns with our values and purpose. Mortality, far from being something to fear, becomes an essential teacher, a reminder to live with intention, gratitude, and virtue. The wisdom of the Stoics encourages us to see death not as an end to be dreaded, but as an integral part of life's natural cycle. This perspective dissolves the distractions that hold us back. It asks us to let go of trivial worries, stop wasting time on superficial pursuits, and focus instead on cultivating qualities like kindness, courage, and wisdom. When we remember that our time is finite, we begin to make more meaningful choices, choosing connection over conflict, purpose over procrastination, and presence over distraction. Remember the words of Marcus Aurelius, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." This is the heart of Stoicism's message. Death is not the enemy. The real tragedy lies in failing to live fully, in postponing our dreams, delaying reconciliation, or waiting for the perfect time to act. That perfect time doesn't exist. What we have is right now. This very moment is our opportunity to live in accordance with our values, to contribute to the greater good, and to create a life we can look back on with peace and satisfaction. So, how might you begin to live more fully with this perspective? Start by reflecting on what truly matters to you. What are the relationships, projects, or values that you want to prioritize? And just as importantly, what distractions or fears can you let go of to make room for those priorities? Take a moment to consider how you can bring more presence, gratitude, and purpose into your daily life. Whether it's by spending more quality time with loved ones, pursuing a passion you've been putting off, or simply appreciating the beauty of a quiet moment. As we close, we invite you to reflect on your own experiences with this topic. How has the thought of mortality shaped your perspective on life? Are there changes you feel inspired to make after hearing this? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments. And if you found this video meaningful, consider subscribing for more content like this or sharing it with someone who might appreciate the message. Thank you for joining us in this exploration of Stoic wisdom. May the teachings of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus inspire you to live with greater gratitude, virtue, and purpose. Remember, the best way to honor life is to truly live.